Yes, people, wagwan, back at it again with our next video. And today we have a 2009 Honda CR-V in the shop. I'm doing rear brakes on this, and I'm gonna teach you how to do your brakes. Though I'm doing the rear brakes, the front brakes have the same concept, so you should be able to let that transfer over. I'll also teach you when it's time and how to know it's time to change your brakes, and why it's important to change them, and why you can't just drive, ladies. This is actually February the 3rd, and it's getting a lot warmer now, so I'm really happy about that. It's been literally in the 20s and mid 10s for the last couple of weeks. It's been a cold winter, and I'm hoping this is it. But alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is get the vehicle somewhere where you have space to work on it. And what you're going to do first is break loose the lug nuts. I don't know how well you can see that. These things are called lug nuts. They secure the wheel onto the spindle. So the first thing you want to do is find the correct size socket that fits your wheel lug nuts. And it's best to have something like this, like a breaker bar, because you'll have a mechanical advantage when you are going to loosen the thing. So while it's on the ground, break them loose. You're going to go left or counterclockwise. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. We're taking it off, so we're going that way. So while it's on the ground, so that the wheel doesn't move, you break them loose. Boom, like that. That's all you want. Do not start to screw them off. And you do that with all of them, and you want to do it in a star pattern, right? All of them, boom. Obviously, if you have a impact wrench or an impact gun, you don't have to worry about this. You can just secure the vehicle and then zip it off most times. Next, as always, we're going to secure the vehicle. I already explained that in my oil change video, so if you need to refer to that on how to do it, go and come back. But you want to find a jack point. For me, it's at the rear, and I'm using this part, the tow hitch. Be careful, some of them might not all be the same and might not be connected to the frame entirely or as secure as this one. But I use this here, and of course, as always, you find the jack points on the frame, those crimp welds or part of the frame where you're going to secure these. After securing the vehicle, or raising it up and securing the vehicle, we can now take off the wheel. Be careful. Wheels are typically very heavy. And I'm gonna give you a word of advice. Never, ever grab the wheel from inside of the rim and take it off. A quick story. When I was younger, what happened, it had to be somewhere between 10 and 13. I wasn't that strong, but I was working on an Odyssey, and they have some big wheels. Very heavy for a 10 to 13-year-old. I took it off when I was going to change the brakes, and it was too heavy for me. I miscalculated, and the weight made my hands drop down, and it crushed my fingers in between the rim and the rotor. That was a fun summer. So, no do that. So now we're gonna take off the wheels. So remove all your lug nuts. Right? And here's where you want to lift that wheel from. Yes, mine is close to the ground, so that makes it a little bit easier, but you're going to want to lift from the bottom towards the sides so that your hands are free from getting damaged if anything should happen, should you drop it, right? So you want to lift up and off because it's on these wheel studs. Up and off of these wheel studs. Right? So up and off, and then you can go on the ground and easily roll this away. So now we have access to the suspension and braking system. Right. Here is our brake rotor, and here's the caliper, and inside of the calipers are your brake pads. Here's how you're going to know that it's time to change the brakes. First of all, you should start hearing some noise, maybe, because they have something called brake wear sensors on them, where as it gets too low, it begins to scrape the rotor and makes a noise, screeching noise. First, I'll show you how it's supposed to look like, and then I'll show you what this one is. Now, your brake pad is supposed to look like this. Focus. Focus, focus. No magic business. There we go. So here's what your brake pad is supposed to look like. The brake pad is made of two parts, essentially. You have the metal mounting area, and you have the actual pad itself with the friction material that is used to stop the vehicle. Now, you might want to pick up one of these. It is a, there we go, it is a tool used to measure the thickness of your brake pads. You see comes in three colors: green, red, and blue. Ja! And what you want to do is measure the brake pad's thickness like this. Find the one that is closest to it. And this one is 8 millimeters. This is still in the green, so that's good. Now once the brake starts wearing, the brake pad starts to wear, you'll find that it goes down into the yellow, goes 87654, right, millimeters. And when it gets into the red, this is the point where you want to start looking to change it. And this is the point where you would actually change the brake pad. Anything after this becomes dangerous, and you'll see why later on. Now we're going to look at the brake pads that need to be changed. So if you look on your rotor, right here is where you have your pad. So inside of the caliper, let me get some light on that. There we go. Inside of the caliper, right here, that. And there's one on the back side too, but I'll show you the front. Remember, there are two parts to the pad. So you have the mounting part of the pad, so that metal piece, and then you have the friction material that is a bit smaller than the mounting part. And if we use our gauge to measure the thickness, what we find is that that is actually below the minimum on this. Oh my goodness, I just bent up myself. The brake pads on this car are below the minimum that this tool is able to measure, which is 2 millimeters. Meaning, take into consideration that is 2 millimeters. Nearly nothing. Yeah, it didn't focus, sorry. But that's nearly nothing. That means that the friction material is all eaten away, and I'll explain this more later on in the class. So without removing the wheel, goodness, cameraman. If you look where the tip is going, the tip of the measuring tool, you should be able to see it right there where the brake pad is, and you see it's in the red. That's about 3 millimeters, and that's how you know that it's time to change the brakes without removing the wheel. Before going any further, what you want to do is make sure that your brake fluid level is lower than the maximum, because what we're going to do is compress the caliper's pistons, and it's going to push brake fluid back up into the brake reservoir. Meaning if it's at the maximum, the only thing to happen is, yes, it's gonna come out. And you don't want that, because brake fluid, wow. Brake fluid is corrosive to the paint, meaning it's going to destroy it. So make sure it's below the maximum, a significant amount. And if it's not, what you can get is a little syringe from Walmart or something, cost $2 or $3, and you're going to suck some of it out, being very careful not to get it on the paint, and put it in a sealed container. Now, what you want to do is make sure that your emergency brake is off first. And if you look at the back of the caliper, remember I was on this side first, I go and look to the back side of it, you will see two of the caliper mounting bolts, 1 and 2. In my case, these bolts are 12 millimeters. So you're going to get your 12 millimeter socket and your ratchet, turn it to off or to where this will rotate counterclockwise, right, that way, in your hand, and we're going to break them loose. Put it on the bolt and break it loose. That's one, that's that one. Second one's here, that's loose. What you might have to do, sometimes I get lucky and it just comes off, but the piston is sometimes compressed or pushing out on the brake pads, and you may need to compress it a little bit. Sometimes you can use your hand and pull this way and compress the piston enough. I'm not strong, man, you see me. If not, you're going to have to use a pry bar, small pry bar, or a screwdriver and put it in between the caliper and the back of the brake pad if you can. That would end up looking something like this. So you'd put it through the caliper and then it would go on the back side of the old brake pad. This is so that it doesn't damage anything. You don't want to put it on the rotor because that is its mating surface and it's rotating and you're going to stop. You want to have a perfect mating surface, right? So you have it like this, and what you're going to do is you just pull on it like so towards yourself, and you'll feel it kind of releasing itself. That is the piston going back into the caliper. Then you can remove the caliper mounting bolt. Take them out. Make note of where they came from. So I'm putting one here, that's bottom, and the other one is top. Sometimes they're different, so you want to pay attention to everything you take apart. And you should be able to just slide your caliper right off. You also want to pay attention to, for example, the brake line. Anything that might be attached to the caliper and mounted somewhere on the frame. So in my case, it is this brake line with this 12 here. So take that off before you remove your caliper. Now when you're ready to take off the caliper, what you'll probably want to do is make a little tool for yourself. This is just made out of a coat hanger. You know, the metal ones that you get from the dry cleaners. Cut a piece of it and bend it in something like this shape. And what you'll use it to do is you'll hook it on some part of the frame or suspension. When you take off your caliper, right, it should slide off easy like that. What you'll do, considering this doesn't wrap around here, but you'd hook this onto here and it would secure it in the air so that it does not drop. In this case, this wraps around here and I don't really want to reroute the caliper back through here, up here, and then onto that. So as long as it's not going to drop, but I would never advise you to do that. You can place it somewhere like this, but make sure it's secured. Maybe hook this to somewhere else in case it does drop, right? Something like that. Next, we're going to remove the old brake pads from the mounting part of the caliper. And well, look at that.
Life is so mischievous.
It's actually metal to metal. And next, remove the brake hardware. You can use a screwdriver to help you pry up on here, being careful not to scratch your rotor face. And actually, because of that, we're gonna want another rotor. Look at that. Well, after I realized that the rotors needed to be changed, I had to go to the eye doctor, and so I look like this. No glasses. But here we have that the pad began to eat into the rotor. So the rotor surface is actually damaged now and is going to need to be changed, which I went and got some new ones to put on there. But I'm gonna go ahead and show you all how to do the rest of the job. So I'm gonna make that relatively quick. So follow along. We're now gonna remove the caliper mounting bracket. You have these two bolts back here. That is the wrong socket. 1 sec. You have two bolts back here. You have 1 and 2. There are 17s in my case. So loosen them and then take off the caliper mounting bracket. Good practice is to place the bolts immediately back into where they came from so that you don't misplace them or mix them up with your other bolts. Now, once you have the mounting bracket off, you want to remove the hardware and the surface where the hardware goes, right on here. You're going to want to use a wire brush and clean it off. So you'll use something like this, big wire brush along this surface, clean it off. See all that dust? Do not breathe it in. It contains asbestos, which is carcinogenic, cancerous, cancer causing. So you want to do this in open air, which I'm about to go do. The surfaces are now clean. There and right there. The next thing you want to do is make sure your slider pins, these things, are free. Now you see I'm having trouble moving this back and forth. It should move freely back and forth like this, right? So we're going to take these out and we're going to clean them. With the caliper mounting bracket off, what you're going to want to do is pull back the focus now mine. God almighty. You're going to want to pull back the boot off the slider pin and slide the slider pin out. All this on there you're going to want to clean off with a clean paper towel, and what I like to do is use brake cleaner and spray inside of here, wash it out like that, right? Get it all in there and then dump it out and use some compressed air to blow it out. Clean. After cleaning off the slider pins, what you're going to want to use is some silicone brake caliper grease. They normally come in small packets like this when you buy the brake pads, so you can just use these. And what you're going to do is use a decent amount, nothing crazy, and lubricate this. So, right? And then you're going to rub it around the slider pin. Then we will insert the slider pin into the caliper bracket, back into the hole where it came from. And now, if you remember what it looked like before, this is what it should look like. It should be able to move this freely. It actually feels better than the first one you saw. Now, set this aside because we're done with this right now, and we're going to go and change the rotor. Alright, here we are in front of the brake rotor, and what we need to do is there are two screws that hold the rotor onto the wheel hub. Remove these. If you have a regular screwdriver, you know how that works. Most of the time, It's not that easy, but you get the concept. And then you will remove the brake rotor simply like that. As you can see, this marking on the edge is where the brake pad was rubbing against it metal to metal. So this metal onto the brake pad's metal, but not the actual pad with the friction material. And these are now bad. So while you're here, you want to check the thickness of the emergency brake, the drums. And then we're going to put on the new brake rotor. Make sure that this and the other rotor that you just took off are the same. So you can do this on the ground, but make sure that the diameters of each of them are the same, that the mounting holes are the same, and you should be good to go. But I mounted this on here backwards to do this. So as a protective coating, when they're shipping this, to keep it from rusting, what they do is place some oil on the surface of the rotor. But if you have oil on the surface of the rotor while you're trying to stop, then that's a bad thing, because brakes can't stop on oil. You know what I'm saying? So do that, wipe off that surface, flip it around, and you want to pay attention to where these chamfered holes are, or chamfered holes. Those are where those screws are going to go back. And there you see that we have everything lined back up. Now you do the same on this side. Wash off the surface. And wipe it off with a clean shop towel, paper towel, something of that nature. Make sure it doesn't have any oil or any dirt on it. And then we're going to replace our screws here. You always want to do this by hand first, so that the thread catches and you do not cross thread anything. However, Ayman is a professional. And these don't have to be torqued down to anything crazy, because it's just to hold the rotor onto the surface. And the lug nuts will hold the wheel and the rotor together onto here. That will need to be torqued or tightened to a certain tightness. But we'll discuss that in a bit. Back to the mounting bracket. We want to put on the brake hardware back onto this now. Right? How it came on is how it came. What? How it came off is how it should come back on, or be put back on. Right? So you see this tab should go down inside of that slot here, and just like this, and it will hold as it pushes out towards the sides in that slot. Then we're ready to put this back on. Just how this came off is how it should go on. So just be careful not to damage the face of the rotor that you just put on. You're going to catch these bolts by hand. So that's one, and that's two, and then you want to tighten them. And then torque them down by hand. Do not make them too tight, as you risk snapping the bolt. Okay, so that's pretty good. Each of these bolts have a specific torque spec that the engineers have designed for these. You can get that on a software like AllData, but that costs stupid money. It's a commercial thing. And most times for things like these, you have some playroom when it comes to tightening down. Just do not over tighten it and don't under tighten it. As you do more of these, you'll get a feel for it. So you're going to need another tool actually. You have a C-clamp, right? This is going to be used to compress the caliper's piston that we have in here. This is the style where you have a bracket on the inside that holds, or tabs that hold the brake pad onto the piston itself. So this makes it a little bit easier. The other vehicles may not have this. So what you want to do is get your piston compression tool inside here and set it up like this. One face is going to be on your old brake pad and one is going to be on the bolt of the caliper piston, just like this. Right? Never put it on the body of the back of the piston itself. What I mean by that is, you see how mine is on the bolt itself? This metal piece. For the piston to be inside of there, it must be hollow. Therefore, it's going to be weak. And if you place it on there and start to wind it up, you risk crushing and breaking your caliper. And then that's going to cost you a lot more to fix that. As I'm compressing this, I'll tell you about why. Right. So as you compress this, what's happening is the fluid is being pushed back through the brake lines up into the master, well, beyond the master cylinder, into the reservoir. And once this is fully compressed, you can take it off. As you can see, there's a lot more space than before. And what you want to do now is take out the old brake pad, and place a new one in. You'll also have some mounting hardware, so make sure you take note of these. You can remove these. Actually, you should remove these and replace them with new parts. Here's a new one. This acts as a spring or a retaining clamp. So you have this new brake pad. Make sure you match them up. Now we're going to put the new pad into the piston. Most times, like I said, vehicles don't have this style, so you would just put the brake pad into here. You also want to use some brake lubricant and put some on the points of contact where the brake pad and metal, not the part where the friction material and the rotor will stop. That needs to be dry, right? But anywhere where it slides so that it can move and does not seize, that's where you want this lubricant to be. So I normally just use a little screwdriver like this. Makes it a lot easier, and it keeps your hands clean. Right? So that's where you want this. In places like here on the Entiéndelo. Then we can place our new brake pads in, along with our caliper. Just like that. That is good. And the next thing we have to do is replace the bolts that we took out to hold the caliper onto the caliper mounting bracket. So you catch them by hand first, like I said, and then you can tighten them up. You'll get this sometimes. So as you are tightening this, there's a nut. You can see that right there spinning. You must hold that in order to tighten it. So you can use a wrench Actually, that's pretty good.
We have Zoom.
16. Then, of course, you want to tighten it. And you have one here. And that's good. And you want to make sure that the caliper is able to move freely. See that? That's good. And anything else that you took apart while you were under here, place back, just like our 12 that we moved for the brake line. And now here's one of the most important steps. Do not forget to do this, please, because you won't be able to stop, and that's going to be very dangerous. Right? So what you're going to do is, when you finish doing the job, you need to pump up your brakes. It's going to sink close to the floor at first. It's going to go, right? But pump until the pedal feel hardens, right? Once it feels like a regular brake pedal again, like the stiffness that you had before, then you're good to go. And you go test drive your vehicle and make sure that it drives fine. And the reason why the pedal feels like that is because we compressed the piston in towards the caliper. And when we put it back on, that piston is still there and it needs to make up that space. So when you step on the pedal, every time you step on it, the hydraulic fluid pushes the piston closer to the back of the brake pads. When you test drive it now, drive it down the street and you want to score the new surfaces together. Sorry, there's a plane passing. Drive down the road smoothly, accelerate and slow down smoothly. Apply a firm and steady and smooth brake when you're going to score the brakes. This will make sure that the surfaces both meet together well. And try not to brake abruptly, because what will happen is the brake pads will heat up the rotor too quickly and cause the rotor to warp. And when it warps, as you're stopping, if you've ever felt this before, you'll feel a vibration, if it's the front, in your pedal, or if it's the rear, you'll feel it in the body. So be aware of that. Excellent work. Great job. You've done your brakes on your vehicle. Now you have power to stop. As always, watch the video as many times as you need. Refer back to any part that you need so that it becomes a part of you, and practice. You can do it. So make we go on to the classroom. Ready? Boom!